Hey everybody, Niels here, Coconut Cockpit. Tonight I wanted to talk about jamming and maybe the lack thereof in DCS. So the only jamming that we have in DCS right now is protective jamming, as in on the F-16 for example, you equip a jamming pod and it makes it more difficult for radars to lock you up and get a firing solution. What we don't have is something like the mission of a prowler or a growler, where they would accompany a flight and systematically target radars on the ground, jam those radar so the strike package can have a clear way through. So I figured I'd take a stab at building a system that does just that. I don't know anything about electronic warfare. Even if I did, I'm pretty sure all of that is highly classified. So the way that I designed this system is very much from a layman's point of view for DCS, in a way that I think would just make for fun gameplay. It's not based on any real electronic warfare. The system right now has two functionalities. One is triangulating a radar signal to try and find a location, and the other thing is what I call spot jamming a certain location. I'll show the triangulation first. So a good explanation of how triangulation works is actually in the Viper manual. If you go to page 285, it describes how the harm targeting system works and how it pinpoints a location of a radar based on the difference in bearing to where the signal is coming from. And I did did the same thing in my system here. And we can visualize that. So we have a couple of SAM sites. There's an SA6 site here, another SA6 site, and then an SA10 site. So there's 3 radars in this region, 1 radar here. As our little prowler aircraft flies around the region, it's picking up this the signal from all the radars, and then it's using its difference in bearing to those signals to triangulate a location. And to visualize that, we first have to make it a jammer, of course, and then we can visualize it. So what we see right here is basically what's visualized in here and here. So what you need to imagine is there's no way to draw an ellipse or an egg shape while the mission is running that I found. So I had to come up with my own clever way of visualizing it. So this diamond shape is basically the region where it thinks the radar is, and this diamond shape is actually an ellipse shape. So you kind of have to imagine the actual rounded lines being here. So this is where it will guess where the radar is, and the region, as you can see right now, it's pretty big. The blue dots is where the system thinks the radar is, and this is just a random location in this region. Now, as the prowler flies along, its bearing offset is going to get changed, or the difference in bearing is changing, and therefore it's able to shrink the region where it thinks the radar is. So as you can see, the longer it flies along, the closer the region becomes, and by definition, the closer the guess to the actual location of the radar becomes. And then finally it will find a accurate location, and that's usually within, I think I have it set to now, within 800 meters of where the actual position of the radar is. So this is one part of the system, and this is already kind of cool. So imagine you're doing a, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s style mission, and you don't have an accurate location on the radars in the game. You can drop in one of these guys and then use it to provide you with a more accurate location to where SAM systems are, for example. And then the second part of the system is spot jamming. So the way that it works is if we have our jamming aircraft and the red cylinders are radars, the jamming aircraft is able to shine a spotlight basically at any one of these radars or any location. The spotlight has a radius. Anything within that radius has a chance of being jammed. Depending on the size of the radius, the jamming is more or less effective. So if you imagine a very wide cone, that means that the jamming is not really centered at one specific location, but it's just jamming this entire region, potentially making it less accurate than shining the spotlight directly at the location of a SAM site. This is one part of how the jamming works. The second part is the actual skill of the unit of the radar. So this takes into account which decision it will make when it detects it's being jammed, and then how quick it's able to recover from the jamming. So the decision right now is set to if the radar operator is more skilled and he detects it's being jammed, he will actually turn off the radar and not leave himself out there as a homing beacon from harm missiles. So it will just turn off the radar will go offline. He won't be able to shoot you down, but then again, he's thinking about self-preservation. If he doesn't get killed, he can live to fight another day. If the skill of the radar is set to average or low, the chance is more likely that the radar will stay offline, but it just won't shoot you because it can't actually get a lock on you because it's being jammed. But you can imagine the radar operator still trying to work with his system, trying to get a lock on you, leaving his own emissions on, and now he's a perfect target for a harm missile to come after him. Also, the recovery time of the radar is bound to the skill of the operator. So a very skilled operator is able to quickly detect when the jamming has stopped and will then turn his radar back on, or will then make a decision to turn his radar back on, whereas a less skilled radar operator won't be as quick to react. So even when the jamming has stopped, he might still wait for another minute or two before he realized, oh, I'm no longer being jammed, I can actually turn my radar back on. Alright, let's have a look at what this looks like in the game. So I'm in the Viper, and we are looking at the RWR, and as you can see you have one SA6 site, and then this clump here is where the SA10 and the SA6 site are. So if we spread that out, it's difficult to see, but you can see the big bird. There's a 6 here for the SA6 and then CS for the clamshell. So what we can tell our Prowler friend right now is to start jamming the SA6 site in this region, but only jam the frequency of the SA6 site. So it should knock the SA6 site offline, but leave the big bird and the clamshell online. So let's start jamming that region. It might be difficult to see, but we should see one symbol drop off. There we go. So the 6 just dropped off. That site is now being suppressed. For the test, I explicitly set it so that it would drop offline and not that it remains online for you to shoot a harm at. So while this region is being jammed, we can safely say that we won't get any heat from an SA6. So if we tell our Prowler to stop that region now, or stop jamming that region now, the operator will recover and we should see the SA6 pop back up here in a second. There we go. So yeah, it's difficult to see, but there's a 6 here behind the clamshell radar. So yeah, that's how the system works. It's very limited, but it is pretty cool already to drop this into missions, and it also takes the burden away from the mission maker to try and set up a system like this with triggers and zones and user flags and all that kind of stuff. So we can just have this flying around in the mission, tell it to jam specific radars, specific regions, and go from there. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.